it's his half-brother. Probably doesn't want to start a whole bunch of family feuds and whatnot. So he decides to spare him, and he gives him this grace. And like a lot of people, when you give them grace, you give them an inch and they take a mile. And so he decides that, well, if I didn't get my hand slapped this time, might as well try again and see what happens. And so he thinks this is a kind of a license to do whatever he wants. And we see in 1 Kings, 2:13 through 25, that he makes a secondary sort of indirect claim to the throne by asking Abishag, who was David's concubine, to be his wife.
May I actually interject there?
Please.
So before we were starting the study, I just realized when I turned to 1 Kings chapter 1, so it says David in his old age. Well, they didn't have heated blankets back then. And so David wasn't able to keep his body warm in the bed at night. And so what they did is 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 3, so they sought for a beautiful young woman throughout all the territory of Israel and found Abishag the Shunammite. And a Shunammite would have been somebody from not far from Nazareth. They would have lived in the Jezreel Valley between Mount Hebron and between Nazareth in a small kind of foothill area. But anyway, and they brought her to the king. The young woman was very beautiful, and she was of service to the king and attended to him, but the king knew her not. So in the Western world, when we think of a harem, our mind goes to something very particular, thinking about David's harem or Solomon's concubines or things like that. But in fact, this was a woman that he asked for that had never had any relations with a man. And so this was just somebody that served in the court of King David towards the end of his life. I just thought that was an interesting fact to throw in.
That makes all the more reason for Adonijah to want to marry her and be a queen. But he also in that culture and time period, it was kind of known that if the king dies and he has all of his harem or concubines and wives, if somebody else takes over that harem, then it suddenly gives them a position of power, probably not the same as the king, but elevated in stature.
It was a status symbol.
Right.
Like if you go back and study Sennacherib, the king that followed Sennacherib did that exact same thing.
Right. So here he's trying to make a bit of a power play to say, well, I'm going to marry your dad's old concubine, and I'm going to gain status by this. And Solomon was not too keen on this, so he was like, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. And he sends out Mr. Fix-It, Benaiah, to take care of Adonijah.
Yeah, I feel like if you go through, and maybe turn me down just a little bit, but I feel like if you go through and look at Benaiah in Scripture, almost every time that it mentions Benaiah, it either talks about him being the commander of the army, or whenever he comes to visit you, he's the last thing you're going to see. Solomon definitely used him as his executioner in a lot of facets.
So now we're left with this business of Solomon trying to have a situation of clearing out the party that's trying to oppose him as being king, which are all the people that are following Adonijah.
Right, so Adonijah essentially believes that he had the right to the throne because he was David's oldest surviving son. If you talk to people that have a belief of Islam, they will say, well, our religion's the right religion because Ishmael was the first son of Abraham. Well, that's not how, yes, he was the first son, but that's not the one that God chose. And we see the same thing happen here. And so with his older brother, Amnon, and Absalom dead, and David being old and frail, Adonijah viewed himself as the rightful successor, and he supported that claim using key figures like Joab, one of the main commanders, and then also using Abiathar, the high priest. So why would the younger brother supersede the older in line to become king? Only because God said so. Only because God deemed it to be so. God promised the throne to Solomon. It says actually didn't put the passage here. Oh well, I'll just have to read it and you have to trust me and search it on your own. But behold, a son shall be born to you, who shall be a man of rest. I will give him rest from all his surrounding enemies. For his name shall be Solomon, and I will give peace and quiet to Israel in his days. He shall build a house for my name, He shall be my son, and I will be his father, and I will establish his royal throne in Israel forever. And so who was Joab, who was helping with this, not an insurrection really, but this coup to help plant Adonijah as king? Well, Joab was a long-standing commander. He was a nephew of David and would have been a first cousin of Adonijah. But he was fiercely loyal to David throughout all these years, but he was also someone who took his own thoughts and decided to act on them and not so much live for the thoughts of the king. What I mean by that is, think about Abner. Who killed Abner? Joab. Okay. Well, what were one of the other commanders? Oh, Amasa. Who killed him? Joab. So when Joab he also killed Absalom, David's son. What did David say to not do to his son? Don't kill him. Joab killed him anyway. And on David's deathbed, if you go back to the end of 2 Samuel, you'll see where he says, do not let Joab's gray hairs go down to the grave in peace. So then we see Abiathar. So he served prominently alongside Zadok. Zadok ended up being his replacement the following year after his death, but during King David's reign. So while his father Ahimelech was high priest when David ate the showbread, 1 Samuel 21, Abiathar became high priest after his father was killed by Saul. He was later banished by Solomon, ending his tenure and fulfilling the prophecy against the house of Eli. So this is the interesting thing. You have Eli, then you have his son Phinehas. Well, Phinehas ended up dying in the raid where the Canaanites or the Philistines took the Ark of the Covenant. Well, before Phinehas died, he had a son. Well, that son ended up being Ahitub, Ahitub. And then Ahitub had another son, Ahimelech. And then Ahimelech had a son, Abiathar. And so Eli ended up being Abiathar's great-great-grandfather. And he was the last direct descendant of Eli to work as high priest. And that's why it says, thus it fulfilled what God had said, that Eli's descendants were no longer going to work as the high priest. And so it took these to his great-great-grandson, but God fulfilled the promise that he made in the final persecution to Eli for not what he did do, but what he didn't do. So in 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 46, we finally see that after 3 years, after he takes the throne, he finally has peace. He finally has stability, and he finally has security in Solomon, his reign and his kingdom being established firmly against all counterbids for the throne. And so at that point, really, that leaves us open to the rest of what we see about Solomon's life. Solomon, God gave him the opportunity to ask for anything. And he could have asked for anything, but he decided to wait. He decided to go ahead and I'm going to wait, and I'm going to give this mic to Phil instead of trying to stall.
Okay.
So just hold it up and talk into it.
Okay. Yeah, so what most people know about Solomon is his wisdom, right? Like, the wisdom of Solomon is kind of the benchmark for everybody to be, he's the wisest man that ever lived. And so we look to his wisdom even today still to guide us. He wrote the book of Proverbs, generally credited for writing Ecclesiastes and the Song of Solomon. So I'm just going to go through just a couple of the Proverbs and show how they're still applicable today, even though they were written, 3,000 years ago, something like that? Yeah. And then if anybody has anything that they want to add, please feel free. So the first one is Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So to me, that's still applicable today, because we can say there are those out there that don't care to understand what God can do to them or for them. Is it working? It will be nice.
Oh man, that was fun. You guys try to stall in the middle of a Bible class when you're supposed to pass it off to the other person. That was great.
All right, so.
Okay,
We're good?
You should be good.
We're good? Yeah, all right. Okay, so, perfect. So to me, this wisdom is saying there are people out there that don't care to understand what God can can do to them or for them. But the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So if you have that understanding of what God can and do for you, that is the beginning of knowledge and wisdoms. And Solomon was at the top of that. So we can follow along those footsteps by knowing and fearing in the Lord. You have anything you want to add about that?
I was actually writing something down I'd found earlier today while we were studying together to get ready for this. It really made me laugh because you guys have heard the saying. I used to have a math teacher tell me all the time whenever I messed up in high school, he would say, a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. Or he would say, a broken clock's right twice a day, Selman. And he would do something to make fun of me. But Proverbs chapter 14, verse 33. Proverbs 14:33. Wisdom rests in the heart of a man of understanding, but it makes itself known even in the midst of fools. So even a fool can say something wise every once in a while. So wives,
I just did it a minute ago, so that worked out. Wives,
there is hope for your husband yet, mine included.
Anybody have any comments about that one? All right. So next one I will mention is Proverbs 4:23. I should take my glasses off so I can read this. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. So immediately when I heard this one, I thought about Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, specifically Matthew 6:21, where he says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be." So your heart, and again, in this instance, 3,000 years ago, when people spoke about the heart, that was really like the mind, the body, like the soul. Like the heart is where your actions came from. And so to say that, be careful of where your heart goes, because that's where the rest of your life is going to follow. That's where all of your actions are going to come from. So again, where your treasure is, that's where your heart's going to lie. Whatever you care for and treasure, that's what your heart is going to want. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, so funny enough, it's even funnier because he was a contractor that I hired out to work on a rental property, and he normally says, he's like, "Oh, you're good," like, "Oh, you're good," "Oh, you're good," like anytime I make an apology for something or anything like that. Well, I was talking and I bought the wrong adapter for a trailer. I bought a 6-round and not a 7-blade, and so I learned that mistake. And I made 2 trips to O'Reilly's, maybe 3, but we figured it out. But as I was saying it, I said, "Man, I'm dumb." And he goes, "Oh no, you're dumb." And he went, "I did not mean to say that." He's, "I am so sorry." And his face got red. And I said, "Wow, so that's what you really think?" And he goes, No, I didn't mean to." And I said, "No, it's okay." I said, "You wouldn't have said it if it wasn't already in your heart." I said, "So you really do believe that about me?" And he said, "No, I really don't." But it made me think about this passage. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Whatever you say, your actions, your deeds. And so I may turn that into a joke with him, but I don't think he liked it very much.
It's all right. You're dumb. All right. So the next one we'll talk about is Proverbs 22:1. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. So what does this mean? A good name. In honor shame culture, which is the culture that was around back then 3,000 years ago, which is, your name, your honor was all that you had. It wasn't all that you had, but it was the greatest thing that you had, and your reputation preceded you. That's why you often see in the Old Testament instances where they say the name of God, because that's essentially saying the reputation of God is going before him. Mm-hmm. And so it essentially signifies that a good name, your reputation, your honor, your integrity, how people think of you and trust you, is way more important than monetary gain. And here in America, cash rules everything around me. So we have to weigh that. Like, do I want to go and get cash, or do I think that my reputation is going to be stained if I do? So again, another 3,000-year-old bit of wisdom that is still relevant today. Thoughts?
Yeah, I really think if you have a bad name, there's no amount of money that can erase that. Like if you're just known for being that person, maybe years and years of a changed lifestyle and attitude could redirect that. But that's part of the reason, if you think about qualifications for elders, is they need to be blameless in the sense that they don't have a terrible name in the community, and they still have that honor, especially the significance that carries in the New Testament world, where it still very much is honor shame based. But to carry it another degree further, in the Middle East, there have been, I think the most recent one's been a while, maybe 2017 or 2015, that was documented. But there's a thing that's called honor killings, where if it has nothing to do with religion, it has everything to do with culture. And there's been instances where there was a Christian father who killed his daughter, a man who claimed Christendom, who killed his daughter because she was going to marry a Muslim man because it was going to dishonor the family. And there's been a Muslim father who's killed his daughter because she was going to marry a Christian man because that dishonored their family, to the point where this father cared more about the honor of their family than they did about the life of their own child. And so I don't say that to exaggerate. I don't say that to blow the Middle East out of proportions, because the Middle East largely isn't like that. I lived there for a couple of years. It's not. But that goes to a level of degree to show the honor-shame culture and just how deep-rooted that can be, especially in certain families and villages. And so I think when we look at that, I feel like it's almost harder to gain a good reputation than it is money.
You can drain your reputation as easily as you can drain your bank account. But it's probably easier to refill your bank account than it is to refill your reputation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Not only affects you, like generations, somebody as last name.
Yeah. Rough going around the world with Hitler as a last name, right?
And think of you spend all your money that name long after.
Nobody's naming their kid Adolf anymore.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Next one. This is Proverbs 17:9. He that covereth a transgression seeketh love, but he that repeateth a matter separateth very friends. This is clearly from the King James Bible. So this is talking about gossip. So even if you know something is true, let's say you got your hot bit of tea, you can choose to tell your friends about this, and it might completely destroy somebody's reputation, which we just talked about. Or even if it's a true thing, you don't have to gossip that to other people, and it's probably a better thing that you don't, so that people's lives are not potentially ruined by it.
I think it also goes into a level of forgiveness. Like if you, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something. Like if I invited you over to my house and you destroyed my Catan board game, which I very much enjoy playing, but my Catan board game,
would never dream of doing.
And then you destroyed that, and then later, let's say a month later, I said, well, I forgive you. But then we get in an argument a couple of weeks after that, and I said, well, if you wouldn't have just destroyed that game, then none of this would have happened. Well, then what does that do? Well, that makes you feel inadequate. That makes you feel hurt. But did I really forgive you? Well, no, because I'm bringing it back up.
Right.
And so if I really allow love in my heart to cover up that transgression, well, then I'm not going to keep bringing it up to try to bring defacement on you.
Sure. Good point. All right, last proverb that we'll go over.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, my bad.
One of the things that you throw into it, it kind of makes me think about politics.
Uh-oh.
Because that's all politics is. It's trying to defame, talk about the other person. You don't even have to talk about truth. Why?
Just dehumanize.
People believe it.
Deny, defame, and counter-accuse.
Yeah.
Just the
Yeah, what do you say we go to our slides on politics? I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
All right. So the last proverb is Proverb 27:19. As water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart. So this one's pretty clear. Like over time, the choices that you make, the things that you do, the actions that you perform, the things that you say to people, they reflect and they reveal who we truly are as people and what we truly love. So if we want to reflect Jesus, God, to everybody else, we need to make sure that our voices, our actions, all our emotions, all reflect that to the outer world. Thoughts?
I think we can just look introspectively at this proverb and of our own hearts and understand what exactly we've done in our own lives. Outside of the commentary he given, it doesn't really need any, because you can just examine your own heart and look at your life. You know, we can fool ourselves a lot, but whenever we can look at the tangible evidences of how we've laid out our life, we're actually going to be able to see the fruit of that.
Yeah.
And that fruit's going to tell us what the truth is, no matter what kind of lie we tell ourselves.
3,000-year-old wisdom, and it's still applicable. So he, as well as I mentioned, as well as Proverbs, Solomon's also credited with writing Ecclesiastes. And so I'll go over a couple things there. We could probably spend an entire
Entire semester
on Ecclesiastes and all the things that it says. But I'll just pick out a couple things here. The first one is from Ecclesiastes 5:1. It says, "Keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God, and be more ready to hear than to give the sacrifice of fools." So what is this telling me? That when I come to church, when I worship with my church family, that I need to do it with listening obedience rather than just foolishly doing whatever I want, really. Not just, like he says, giving the sacrifice of fools, just coming and doing whatever I think is worthy. I have to think about what God thinks is worthy.
Absolutely. I want to read that in the ESV just to help people like me understand
King
better.
James is hard.
"Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. To draw near, to listen, is better than to offer the sacrifice of fools, for they do not know that they are doing evil." I think it goes so much deeper into how we focus on why we worship the way that we do. Like, literally sit down and ask yourself. I was a Christian for, I think, about 2.5 years before I truly understood why we worship the way we do every single Sunday morning. I didn't know that. It wasn't until I was preparing to teach somebody else about that where I went through and studied, and I said, oh, that's the book, chapter, verse for this. Oh, that's why we do this. Oh, I didn't know the Lord instituted that. And not to say I was foolish prior, but I definitely didn't have an understanding of the why behind why I was doing that. And I think we can look at all of the churches just as we drive around town or any city really, and we can derive a lot of truth just from that saying in Ecclesiastes. You know, I think I remember the first time I was ever studying Ecclesiastes, I told Matt, I said, man, this is really wise. And he just started laughing. He goes, well, they call it wisdom literature for a reason.
Yeah, Ecclesiastes is one of my favorite books. And so the end of the entire book, it ends with this. Ecclesiastes 12, 13, 14. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. So Solomon spends 12 chapters talking about all the things that are happening, everything under the sun, how life is a vapor, and some things are meaningless. But in the end, what he says is the thing that does matter, the thing that does have meaning, is God. That you keep his commandments, that you do what's correct and righteous in his eyes, because at the end of the day, his judgment's all that's going to matter. Whether good or evil, every secret thing, you can't hide from him. Just know that at the end, his judgment's going to matter.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I know Matt and Rob have preached about on different Sundays, but you could give up the entirety of your life for whatever the world had to give you, and that still wouldn't be enough compared to eternity. But yet we don't do that. We trade all of our lives for one little sliver, for one little piece, and we try to fulfill our own hearts following that, and we cast ourselves away from God. And even Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, there was nothing I withheld from myself. He literally said, I'm going to try, and I'm going to try it all at the disposal of being a king. Wives, you name it. Gold, you name it. The palace he had, you name it. And he goes, you know what? I'm going to build a palace like this for my first wife, which he did. You can look at the chariot cities. He gave as a gift to the king of Tyre 20 cities in Galilee. Who can just do that as a payment for something? Solomon had all of these things at his disposal, and yet he said when he came back to the end of it,
It's all a vapor.
It's all a vapor. And the only thing in the end of the matter that really matters is serving God and making sure that you're right with Him. And that, I don't know, it makes me feel a lot better knowing I don't have to try it.
Yeah, right.
So we'll look in, if anybody has anything they want to interject, and please feel free to. But we'll go briefly into the Song of Solomon. There's two passages in particular I wanted to focus on. Song of Solomon, chapter 8, verses 6 through 7. Song of Solomon, chapter 8, verses 6 through 7. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is strong as death, jealousy as fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he would be utterly despised. What man wouldn't give every single thing in the entire world for his wife? What man who truly loves his wife wouldn't die right now for her to live? Wouldn't sell every single asset, every single thing that he had, down to the shirt off of his back, just to make sure that he could have his wife and to hold her and to be with her and to love her? Yet this also tells us, the end of that passage shows contempt for fake love. That even if a man, alternatively, if a man was trying to buy someone's love, it's an insult to that person and also to love itself. It insults the very nature of love, which is why that person or that suitor is despised or is scorned. I think this really, when I read it, it made me realize that I would do anything and everything for the love of my life. And it should drive me to actually be willing to live that out and to act that out, not just think it, dramatically within my own heart, but actually live it and show that. A true love is a working love. And so this gives profoundly wise perspective on love's permanence, how much it costs, its divine origin, and how it works in a marriage context, and also in the covenant that God's made for us. There's also an aspect of love I wanted to talk about, which is the restraint of love before its due season. If you'll turn to Song of Solomon, chapter 2, verse 7. Song of Solomon 2:7. Again, as we turn to chapter 2, verse 7, and also repeats this in chapter 3, verse 5, if you want to follow. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. The daughters of Jerusalem here reference to unmarried young women, and so the instruction is directly aimed at those who are not yet married or fully involved romantically. That stirring up or awakening the love means a deliberate, exciting, romantic, or sexual desire before the right time. That can mean pushing a relationship. That can mean living in fantasies or physical intimacy beyond what God intends in that season in life. We have to guard our heart and guard our body. Love in the Song of Solomon is portrayed as intensely powerful. What we just read says its flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord, and many waters cannot quench love. Because it is so strong, because it is so palpable. If you prematurely arouse love, then it can quickly and easily run ahead of your marriage. It can run ahead of self-control. It can lead to making compromises. It can lead to heartbreak. It can lead to comparing yourself to others, and eventually to sexual sin. For a single Christian today, the principle speaks directly to things like a lot of what our American culture focuses on. If you go to just about any magazine, any internet page, if you look at the front of any, really just in most television, you're going to see things that are charged in that nature. Go to a college campus and walk around. But in the Song of Solomon here, it charges us that love is a beautiful and a wonderful thing, but is also a very powerful thing. And he warns us to please not try to force or prematurely awaken what God intends to ripen in its proper season. Solomon contributes 3 books to the Bible. Solomon also builds the temple. And now, 3,000 years later, it's pretty much a universal symbol. He is a universal symbol for what wisdom is. And yet, he still made some pretty foolish decisions before the Lord. I want to hand this section off to Phil to kind of break into this some. Do you mind reading Deuteronomy 17, 14 through 20?
Sure. All right. So we're going to take a step back to Deuteronomy when Moses is talking to the generation about to go into the Promised Land, and he's given the laws once again. And these specifically talk about what the kings over them are going to do. So Deuteronomy 17, 14 through 20. When you come to the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and you possess it and dwell in it, and then say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me. Well, they hadn't done that yet, but clearly he was like, you're going to do this. It's stupid, but you're going to do it. You may indeed set a king over you, whom the Lord your God will choose. One from among your brothers you shall set as king over you. You may not put a foreigner over you who is not your brother. Only he must not acquire many horses for himself, or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses, since the Lord has said to you, you shall never return that way again. And he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he acquire for himself excessive silver and gold.
Wait, this is what the king's not supposed to do?
Correct.
So the king should not be doing this?
Should not be doing those things.
Okay, all right. You can continue.
Yeah. And when he sits on his throne in the kingdom, he shall write for himself in a book a copy of this law, approved by the Levitical priests. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it in all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God by keeping all the words of this law and these statutes and doing them, that his heart may not be lifted up above his brothers, and that he may not turn aside from the commandment, either to the right hand or to the left, so that he may continue long in his kingdom, he and his children in Israel.
So the reason why we read that is because there's a lot that Solomon messed up here. And so we're going to leapfrog back and forth going through different avenues and areas where Solomon messed up. I might have said Solomon, I meant to say Solomon, where he messed up.
Oh, Saul messed up too.
Yeah, Saul also messed up. All the kings in some form or fashion. All of us, actually, some form or fashion. But Solomon married women from many different nations. So we just read about the classifications for that, but Solomon married a Moabite, an Ammonite, an Edomite, a Sidonian, a Hittite woman, and a lot of these all remained pagan. And so Solomon ended up breaking those commands, and then later led his heart further away from God. And there's other references to that, but for the sake of time, I'll pass to Phil for the next one.
Okay. So Deuteronomy 17:17, he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away. Solomon had, count them, 700 wives and 300 concubines. That's from 1 Kings 11:3, directly violating this. I love my wife, Amber. She is great. I'm so proud and honored that she decided to marry me. I love her more than anything else. But I'm so glad that there's only one of her. Because 700, there's no way that I could deal with that. But in all reality, there's a reason. I love I love her so much, and I'm able to give her all of my love and all of myself. There's no way that I could do that with 700 other people, let alone 2 or 3. So there's a reason that we're not supposed to have all this, and Solomon clearly did not follow these directives.
I didn't think you were actually going to say that. That was very brave.
She knows. She knows.
All right. Solomon ended up turning his heart to other gods. 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 4 through 6. He had 700 wives who were princesses and 300 concubines. Sorry, that's 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 4 through 6. And his wives turned away his heart. For when Solomon was old, his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. So Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not wholly follow the Lord. and did not wholly follow the Lord, as David his father had done. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and after Molech, the abomination of the Ammonites, on the mountain east of Jerusalem. And so he did for all his foreign wives who made offerings and sacrifice to their gods. Hey, what's the first commandment out of the 10 Commandments? You shall have no other gods before me. There's just one God. Okay, what was the second command out of the 10 Commandments? No idols or graven images.
It's the old 1-2 combo.
Yeah. So Solomon really should have pursued prohibition. He really should have stopped that worship in the high places, but instead, he decided to build them. He decided to promote them. He decided to say that they were okay, especially being in a point of leadership. In fact, in Deuteronomy 12, 2 through 4, they were supposed to destroy those high places, yet Solomon ended up building them. But the worshipers of Molech, if not everybody knew this, would actually sacrifice children to Molech. And here we see where Solomon builds an altar to the god Molech. God always tends to draw the line at child sacrifice. If you look at Jeremiah chapter 7, verses 30 through 34, we see another instance of that. Now, Solomon didn't sacrifice children, but he approved of and built an altar for a god that people would commonly and had been sacrificing children to in the past. The fake god Molech actually goes back to the initiality of the Israelites' captivity within Egypt. If you go to Genesis chapter 15, verse 6, we see where God ends up becoming, he says, your people will be here in captivity until the iniquity of the Amorites is complete. Well, what were the Amorites doing? Specifically at the end of the reign, whenever the Israelites came out. Well, through archaeological evidence, excavations, and I've actually been to Tel Gezer where we had found this. I believe Victoria was with me as well. But roughly 450 years prior to the Amorites in Gezer sacrificing these children of the pagan gods, Genesis explains that God knows that's going to happen. But by building the high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and for Molech, the abomination of the Ammonites, Solomon's enabling his pagan wives to go through with their sacrifices. But where I was getting back to with Tel Gezer is they found a Canaanite high place. So it's about these four, almost think about Stonehenge or like an obelisk. There's nothing on the top of them. There's these four large stones that come up out of the ground, and one of them has actually fallen over. But when they excavated that entire area, they found essentially the burned bones of nothing but infants. And so they had found out that was a place, and they dated it to the exact time as when the Israelites came out of their captivity in Egypt. And so the Amorites lived there. The Amorites made those sacrifices, and we also see that coincide with God saying that their iniquity, their sin was finally complete. Hey, you can come out of captivity now. Now I want you to go here, and I want you to destroy this people because of what they're doing. So if anybody ever wants to see pictures of the actual obelisk and where that would have happened itself, or look at it on a map, I can explain some of that to you. But for the sake of time and not boring everyone, we'll go on to the next point.
Okay. Next point. So Deuteronomy 17:16. Only he must not acquire many horses for himself, or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses. Okay, cool. So 1 Kings 9:19. The cities for his chariots and cities for his horsemen that Solomon built. Okay, well, maybe he wasn't acquiring them, but they're already there, so he had to build cities for them. 1 Kings 10:26. Solomon gathered together chariots and horsemen. Okay, so that's bad, but maybe they didn't come from Egypt.
Yeah, maybe they came from
1 Kings
north.
to two verses later. Horses imported from Egypt and Q. All right, so clearly fail on all of these. Solomon amassed 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen and imported horses from Egypt in direct conflict with this command. So why is this even a big deal? Because one of the things that really chafes God, according to the Bible that we read in the Old Testament, is when people don't put their faith or trust in him. And just like when David counted,
Took a census
took a
of the
census
people.
of the people, he said, don't do this. And he did it because there were enemies at the gate, and he was fearful. And God said, don't worry, I'll take care of it. You don't have to count the people. I got this. David's like, I still want to count my armies to make sure that I have the people. And that was bad. And this is the same principle. You don't need to amass horses and chariots, especially from the people that we just came out of captivity from. I've got this. I've got you. Have some faith. You're good. And Solomon's like, nah, I still want to have a big old army and impress my friends. And so that's bad. So the point is, we also need to have faith in God and what he tells us. We don't, he's got this. He's got us. He's got our backs.
And so we look at the next point. You're not going to amass for yourself a lot of gold or great multiply silver and gold. 1 Kings 10, 14 through 23, we see where Solomon had 666 talents of gold yearly, not including that which came from taxes or came from other kings that gave contribution. This is just what he had pulled in and of himself. And then we also see Deuteronomy 17:17, nor shall he greatly acquire for himself silver and gold. And so the stress on Solomon's annual intake of gold and his lavish use of it shows regard for that royal restriction that God had.
Disregard.
Disregard. Yeah, he regarded it, just not in a good way. And so then, Phil, we'll go ahead and
do
your last one.
Yeah, this last one is not necessarily a direct violation of law, but it just shows Solomon being kind of a jerk. In 1 Kings 5, 13 through 18, it essentially says that he levied 30,000 men and forced them into labor gangs. And then in Kings 9, 15 through 23, there's a description of the forced labor from remaining non-Israelites in the land. And then after Solomon's death, 1 Kings 12, 3 and 4, after Solomon's death, Israel complained to his son Rehoboam, your father made our yoke heavy. So he's acting very much like Pharaoh did in Egypt, forcing people into mass labor, and this is just not what he needs to be doing.
They were enslaved again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
By their own people this time.
That's exactly what Samuel warned them about.
Yeah.
You're going to get a king, and he's going to take your children away from their home. He's going to put them into battle. He's going to make them, do things for him that they otherwise wouldn't have to if you would just follow me, follow God. And even the levy of the 30,000 men, part of that was for the temple, but also part of that was for his house. Part of that was for the house of his Egyptian wife. It wasn't just all for God, but some of that was just for Solomon to have a very nice home. So in short, Solomon was a wise man, and he was a good king, and truly brought the Israelites a time of peace that, in all honesty, I'm not sure if they've seen that even up until our day, the level of peace that they had under Solomon and not having any war or battle, except when Solomon started to turn his heart towards the end of his life towards God, and especially after his death, when we see Jeroboam and Rehoboam and the folly that comes after that, which I'm not sure if y'all are there in Matt's class yet, but that's going to be a great portion to study through. But having said that, he made his fair share of mistakes of what God called him to, especially as he turned his life to the pagan gods after so much faithfulness of God, after following God with so much piety for so long of his life. He allowed his heart to turn away at the end. Solomon was a great king, but he fell short. He could not be the king of redemption for Israel. He may have been the king that they wanted, but he wasn't the king that they needed, which makes it all the more apparent as to why we needed Jesus and continually need him every single day. Ask yourself tonight, in the years of serving God, have you, like Solomon, allowed foreign idols into your heart? It wasn't that Solomon deserted the Lord, but it was that he stopped devoting his heart wholly to God. WHOLLY, wholly, completely to God. He only gave part of it. What do you allow to share that space that should only belong to God in your heart? If the answer is anything but God, then you need to change that. Our Lord is a jealous God, and he's not going to share. In closing, one thing I would say is don't think that having wisdom makes you good in a good standing with God. Having wisdom puts you in a good place with God. Solomon's wisdom stayed with him even after his heart turned to other women and other gods. Similar with Samson. And they ended up breaking all kinds of moral law. Wisdom and understanding are good, but as told in the beginning of the book of Proverbs, but I dare to say that it's not everything. The wisest thing to do is to be obedient to God. Would you think God's impressed with what God already knows? Hey, God gave this man an incredible aptitude for math, and that man does extravagant things with that math, but God knew all of it in the beginning anyway. Why would God be impressed with what he did with something that he gave him in the first place? Well, this man was a great orator. He was able to speak, phenomenally to these great masses and win people over to the campaign that he was having. Is God impressed by that? Well, no, because God gave him those skills in the first place. What is God impressed by? The only thing that you can truly do in your soul of souls and your heart of hearts that God in and of himself is not just going to make and manifest or put in you. It's your heart of love for him. If you want to impress God, you've got to give him your heart, because everything else is his in the first place. Faithfulness is what's going to impress him. So if you truly want to impress God, show him your love through your faithfulness. That's what will truly please the Lord. Not all of the other. Just that. That's it.
Pretty simple.
It is. And that's what he wants from us. Well, having said that, we're at time and we're also finished with our notes for tonight. Does anybody have any?
I was curious, what his wisdom problem. Did he write these? Yeah. I mean, at what point did he write these? Did he write these? Right.
I don't know the answer to that. If I had to take a guess, I would say at least Ecclesiastes reads like it was written at the end of his life, like he had, gathered all this wisdom together, and now it's starting to be over, and he's reflecting on it.
You would wonder that if he was writing these words down, writing these very brilliant things down, that he would be doing. But if he wrote these, then he
That's true. I haven't studied it in a long time. I remember reading several years ago that I do believe Ecclesiastes was towards the end of his life, but looking into the other aspects, I'm not.
and that makes sense. Ecclesiastes.
And maybe Song of Solomon was wife 1 of 700.
Yeah, it would read that way, wouldn't it? That's funny. I didn't think about that. But I think it also says where he wrote 1,000 songs. And so there's other songs that he would have written that we don't have. And there's a lot of material that he would have put out that we don't have. Even other people would come just to hear his wisdom. So it's much like, I think, the ministry of Jesus. There's a lot of things that Solomon would have written or would have said or done that we don't have. Okay. Yeah, so pretty much the span of him being king. But altogether, I personally don't know, and Phil also doesn't know.
It would be interesting. Most of us, the older you get, more knowledge you have, ability to write something. So you would think.
Wife number 1.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Great question. That was a great comment as well. Anything else before we close out?
I'll just add, it's possible that his wisdom in the end ended up corrupting him too. If, if everybody's coming to you and telling you how great you are, and you might have written all these things down, and you're, oh, man, I'm so smart. I'm so smart that I can maybe have another wife and another one, and so on and so forth. And maybe I should have this gold and build the temple and do all these things. So it's possible that that wisdom ended up corrupting him too.
Yeah, maybe he started thinking more of himself than his other brothers. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and close in a prayer. Father, thank you for being with us this day. Thank you for allowing us to wake up this morning to see the beauty that you've created, to take air into our lungs, and to be able to love those around us. Lord, each day is sufficient for its own trouble, for its own toil and work. Father, I pray that you be with us the rest of this week as we go out and labor, that we don't just look at the physical work in front of us, but we think of the spiritual blessings that we have in you and so many of the people around us that don't have those spiritual blessings. And Father, they may not even be reading their Bibles, but Lord, we might be the only piece of you that they try to recognize in their life. So Father, I pray that you'll help to equip us for every good work. Help us to reach out to other lost souls in the community, to try to show your love to others. And at the very least, Lord, I pray that you'll look at us with favor as we come before your throne at the beginning of next week as we go to worship you. Father, I pray that you'll please be with our hearts and help us to be the men and women of God that we need to be for your kingdom and for the lost world around us. Thank you for this time to study through your word, which so many people have died for us to be able to have in front of us this day, and for your Son, who took the ultimate sacrifice of his death so that we can have this covenant with you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.